This video is meant to accompany the Algebra 2 Unit 1 test review guide and just should give you some brief hints about how to use Desmos on your Unit 1 test that you'll be taking. Notice that on the back of your test review guide there are 5 boxes that have reminders about using Desmos. And the first one is that if you're typing an inequality that has the less than or equal or greater than or equal, that little equal sign, if you look at your keyboard, you can see the greater than and less than signs on the bottom row with the comma and period. So if I was, for example, saying 2x is greater than 5, or let's say I have 3y is less than 2x plus 1, those keys you just use shift and either comma or period. But let's say that I wanted to type something that had an equal sign. I would start typing my equation as usual. So let's say 1 minus 5x. And then if I want less than or equal to, I would type the less than and then type the equal sign that's in the top row of your keyboard, and that'll automatically include an equal sign with the less than sign. And then the same thing, that's an awful equation, but you get the idea. And then with if it were a greater than sign, let me give you something better. How about, let's do an absolute value. So if I said absolute value of x minus 2 is greater than or equal to, let's say 4, not so much greater, but you get the idea that you can press the less than or greater than sign and then the equal sign, and it will automatically include the equal in the inequality symbol. Moving on, in the next box, if you want to type an absolute value like I just did, where I said use the vertical line character that's in the second to top row all the way to the right of the keyboard, you have to use shift. You could say something like x minus 3, complete the absolute value, and then let's say minus 2. That's one way of typing an absolute value. But then another way of typing an absolute value would be to use the letters ABS and then parentheses. So this time maybe I'll say 3x plus 1 parentheses minus 4. And those parentheses, the ABS and then the parentheses, serve at the same thing as the vertical lines. Some of you have found that if you give yourself this show keyboard or show keypad in the bottom of the screen, that you can also get an absolute value symbol already typed for you. So you can click on that and then type your, let's say, let me put my cursor out in front and say negative 1/2, and then x plus 3, and then I use right arrow to get outside of it, and then plus 5. So I thought it would be a really good idea to make these videos at school, and apparently I should have been making them at home because it's pretty loud in this building and it's a teacher work day. Not sure why it's loud. But anyway, there's different ways of typing absolute value, and I'm going to pause this while the noise stops. Moving on then. Well, at this point, I've probably deleted 3 or 4 minutes of desks being moved around upstairs and have definitely decided that all future videos will be recorded in my home. Moving along, one of the things that I noticed in class was that it's not obvious when you use an equal sign and when you don't use an equal sign. So let's say that you want to just do a computation. If I say to you, evaluate this function, this absolute value function for, let's say, f of negative 3, you want to type the expression without any variables in it. You want to type with no x's, no equal signs. So for example, if I said to you the absolute value of x plus 2, evaluate that for f of negative 3, you would say, okay, well, I'm going to put a negative 3 where the x is, plus 2, and the answer to that is equal to 1. That's not going to draw a graph in the graph space. It's only going to give you a computation. And again, it gives you a computation if you've typed an expression that doesn't have an equal sign or a variable in it. If you want, now I'm moving on to the next space on the back of your review guide where it says to look at the graph of a function. If you want to just look at a graph, you're thinking to yourself, here's an equation, I need to know what the graph looks like. Then you can either type an expression that has an x in it or type an equation that has an x, a y, and an equal sign. So for example, I could type, let's say the absolute value of x plus 2, close the absolute value, minus 1, or I could type y equals, let's say, 3 times the absolute value of x minus 5, close the absolute value, plus 2. Another thing that I like about Desmos is that it doesn't have to take an equation that has y equals everything. So let's say, for example, I want to look at a graph, but I don't quite know how to solve for y. Let's say I have this equation 3x minus 2y equals 17. It will graph a function that's not in y equals form, which is different than most graphing calculators where you can only look at the graph of an equation that has been written in y equals form. Finally, if he doesn't move any more desks upstairs, what's going to come in really handy is if you're asked to draw the graph of a function. That at that point, you have to write your function in y equals form. So on a separate piece of paper, compute, rearrange the equation so that you start with y equals, and then you can either type just the stuff after the equal sign or type y equals and the whole thing. So you can say, this is what I'm talking about, y equals, and then let's say, how about 1/2 absolute value of x plus 3 minus 4. Well, that's your graph, but what if you need to put that on your paper? You click on this little gear symbol here that says Edit List, and it gives you these options, and you want this option that says Convert to Table, and that'll give you some of the points. But notice that I also need these points because I need to make it look like an absolute value graph, and I don't have these point values. Well, if I want to, let's say, start at, let's say, -7, I can go down here, click beneath the last x value, and then just start typing. -7, down arrow, -6, -5, -4, -3, and that fills in any of the points that I don't already have. The other thing that I was saying is that if I wanted to just type an expression that has an x but not y equals, it will do the same thing. So let's say that I want to graph 2 times the absolute value of 3x plus 1 minus 4. Let's say I need to put that on my graph paper. I want to graph that equation or that graph. I'm going to do the same steps. Click on the gear, click on Convert to Table. It's giving me some of the points that'll help graph in this table, and I didn't need to type that y equals part. The other thing that's helpful is that if I click on the graph, it'll give me things like the x-intercept, the y-intercept, as well as any vertex or max or min. And that's going to come in handy when we get to different types of equations, being able to find the vertex and maxes and mins.